Before now, mysteries had never been discussed or uncovered. But now, Contumacious Ant and Atreya are back for a second season. The MO Podcast.
Hello and welcome all into the MO Podcast. You're here with me, Contumacious Ant, and my lovely co-host,
Atreya.
And today we are going to be taking a step into the realm of the paranormal.
Ooh.
So, I'm going to be talking about the Hopkinsville incident, which was in 1955 and involves goblins. And what are you going to be talking about?
I'm going to talk about the curse of James Dean's car.
Well, that sounds interesting.
It sounds pretty boring, but it's not.
Well, it's a curse on a car.
Yeah, it's like real life Christine.
Do you want to start with that?
Sure. Okay, so James Dean, for all he was super famous, actually wasn't really that good an actor. You're tearing me apart here. If you've ever seen that clip. If you haven't, you have to watch it because it's fucking hilarious. It's just terrible. It's Tommy Wiseau level. And he actually only ever starred in 3 movies, only one of which was released in his lifetime.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, so he wasn't actually like as big a star. I think he was just as big as he is because, you know, he died really young, so it was like tragic.
It's the allure of him, isn't it?
Oh, he was fucking gorgeous as well.
Yeah. He's cool.
Like, everybody would. So, yeah, he was cool. Yeah. So he wasn't in that many movies, but he did like to race. He loved racing cars. And he wasn't like a professional or anything, but he took part in a handful of races. And he won a handful. And after he started making money with his first movie, he bought one of only 90 ever made Porsche 550 Spider convertibles. Now, apparently, these cars were really difficult to handle. They were, like, not rear-wheel drive, but the steering was kind of from the back. It was just a really difficult car to handle. And if you've seen it, it's fucking tiny. It's like the same size as a smart car. I would be terrified to drive one of those things. But he loved it. It was his pride and joy, and he had a car customizer paint the number 130 on the front and sides, and the name Little Bastard on the back, which apparently was a nickname he got from on set from one of his actor colleagues, because he apparently was a little bastard. So this car that was his pride and joy, he apparently showed it off to a guy an actor he was working on a set with, Alec Guinness.
Look.
And he said, I've just bought a new car. Do you want to come and have a look at it? And Alec Guinness was like, oh, okay, have you ever been in it? And he went, no, I haven't driven it yet. And Alec Guinness said that he just felt this little voice inside his head that just...
Yoda.
Baby Yoda. Don't get in the car. It was like he said it just seemed it looked sinister, and he said to James Dean, please don't get into that car. It's now 10 o'clock on Thursday, and by 10 o'clock next Thursday you'll be dead if you get into that car. Incidentally, James Dean died in the car exactly 7 days later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the car crash I won't go into great detail about because it's kind of fairly common knowledge. But him and his mechanic, who was a proper Porsche mechanic, they were traveling to Salinas in California to participate in a race in the Porsche Spider. James Dean was driving. They collided with a Ford Tudor. And it was September the 30th, 1955. So what happened was the Ford was turning into a junction, and James Dean was travelling straight, so the Ford basically turned right into his path, and I think he thought that he was a good enough driver to kind of swerve out of the way, but they basically head-on collided, and the Porsche was just crumpled into a horrible mess.
A 1955 Ford is going to just pure steel.
Well, yeah.
There's no move in that thing.
No, the Ford itself was like very minor damage, like very, very minor. And James Dean's car was just it looked like it was made out of paper or tinfoil. It was just crumpled. It was a horrible mess. He was killed instantly. His neck was snapped. And his mechanic was actually thrown from the car, fully conscious. And he did survive, but with serious injuries. And he was, so traumatized for the rest of his life because he blamed himself for whatever reason, that he attempted suicide twice. And he actually attempted murder-suicide. He tried to kill his wife and then kill himself, which failed. And ironically, he was killed in a drunk driving accident in 1981.
I'm not laughing.
So.
Yeah.
The irony, I know, right? So, of course, it was a horrible tragedy, such a waste of young life. Actually, there is another bit of irony, right? James Dean did this interview about, car safety. And right at the very end, the interviewer said to him, "Is there anything that you'd like to say to our young drivers?" And James Dean totally ad-libbed, and he said, "Yeah, drive safe, because the life you save might be mine."
No.
Well,
it's full of irony, this one, isn't it? Yeah.
It's not them that needs to be driving safe, mate. Yeah, okay, so the car, which was a total write-off, still had belonged to James Dean, and it was therefore a collector's item. So I think his dad actually sold it off. The insurance company paid out the market value of the car, and he sold what was left of it. Now, the engine was basically untouched. It was in perfect condition. It was only the chassis that was completely wrecked. So the engine and the drivetrain was sold to doctor and race car driver William F. Esricht, who loaned the parts that he bought to his race car driver friend, who was also a doctor. I don't know why all these doctors are race car drivers. And he was called Troy McHenry. So what happened was they both took the parts of the wrecked car of Little Bastard and they put them into their own race cars. Esrick was taking part in a race with Troy McHenry. They were both in the same race at the same time. Esrick's car rolled over and crashed, and he was seriously injured, but he did survive. But Troy McHenry, his steering locked up. He lost control of the car completely, smacked straight into a tree, and was killed. So, again, coincidence. The chassis was bought by George Barris, who is actually famous for being the guy who created the original Batmobile.
Oh, wow, okay.
You know the orange and black one?
Yeah.
Super cool. So he actually made that. He was a car customizer. And he bought the chassis and he was having it transported to his garage because he wanted to rebuild it. That was a monumental project. There's no way he could have done it. But he wanted to rebuild it, so he had it transported to his garage. As he was unloading it off the truck, the car rolled off the back and it crushed his mechanic's legs.
Wow.
Unfortunate. So it sat in his garage. The mechanic's, I don't know, off in hospital or learning to walk again, I guess. And the garage gets broken into. There's a couple of thieves. One thief, he tries to steal the steering wheel. Something pops out in the car, piece of metal or something, shoots back up, rips his arm apart. He slips over and he breaks his arm as well. They flee in terror. So, the car was then... George Barris was a bit like, oh God, people around me keep getting injured by this fucking car. It's got a mind of its own, honestly. The car, he loaned it to the California Highway Patrol because they wanted to use it in an exhibition for road safety, like drive safe or this is what happened to you.
So like Chips, Eric Estrada and all that.
Yes.
The California Highway Patrol, okay.
Yeah, I feel like they all wore aviators.
Yeah, and short sleeves on a motorbike.
And probably short shorts.
Yeah. Pearly white teeth.
Yeah, and an orange skin. So they wanted to use the car in a safety exhibition. In a kind of, James Dean was cool, you think you're cool, but look what happened to him kind of deal. And they toured it round and blah, blah, blah. Well, it came loose off one of the exhibitions and it fell and it landed on a student and broke their hip.
Yeah, I was going to say, how many kids did it kill? Jesus.
Didn't kill anybody, but it did break a student's hip. Then, after the exhibition, the car was being transported back to George Barris's garage. The truck driver lost control. The truck crashed. He was flung out of the truck. The Porsche fell out of the back and it landed on him and crushed him and killed him. So, yeah. So...
Wait, what? Right, what? So the driver of the lorry lost control. Mm-hmm. He ended up flying out of the window?
I guess, or maybe he didn't have the door shut properly and his seatbelt on.
And then the Porsche rolled out the back or flew out the back?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess maybe he shunted it or something, and he flew out the side and the Porsche and out the back or something, and the Porsche flew out the back and then landed on him and crushed him and killed him.
This is a bit like Brian Harvey in The Jacket Potato and reversing over himself, isn't it, really? This is just one of them things where you go, yeah, okay, well, yeah.
How did you manage that?
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
So, okay, in the end... the car did finally, make its way back towards George Barris's garage, and
why have they not crushed it yet?
I don't know, but it got
melted it down.
They got they got the box car that was transporting little bastard back to George Barris's garage. They opened the doors of the box car,
and it was Optimus Prime inside or something, was it?
It was gone. The car was gone. It vanished. And nobody knew what happened to it. To this day, nobody knows what happened to that car. It never made it back to George Barris's garage. It just vanished off the face of the earth.
So it just, rolled out the back?
Well, I mean, surely somebody... Even as a wreck, it's still a highly recognisable wreck. You'd be like, fuck me, that's James Dean's car I've just seen on the highway. Pull over a second.
Yeah, roll it out of that box car.
It just disappeared, and it's had people scratching their heads for many years. But actually, somebody did come... So this museum, the Volo Auto Museum in America, they were so desperate to find this car that they offered a $1 million reward for anybody who could sell the car to them, or bits of the car to them. So this guy came forward, and he said that when he was 6... him and his dad and a bunch of other guys stole Little Bastard and they hid it behind a wall in a museum.
Okay.
And he said that George Barris was there. But George Barris's daughter says she just doesn't think at all that he would have hid the car away or sold it or anything, because he was such an avid collector and it hadn't hurt him. So you would think he would have just left it in his garage for people to, pay and see.
I've got one question. Why is a 6-year-old kid going out on heists with his dad?
I mean, it's America.
I know it's 1950, whatever, and babysitters, but...
It's America.
And then they hid it behind a wall in a museum.
It's just carting it through the British Museum.
Yeah, and then just put it behind a wall and went, no, look here. Let's be safe. And no one did.
Yeah, apparently they hid it behind a false wall. And the museum employees that heard this were kind of like, right, fairly sure we would have noticed somebody rolling a car through the museum and then building a false wall.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, even the cleaner who's, mopping, and he goes, I had more of a swipe yesterday, yeah. Why does this wall look so new? Why is it hollow? Why is it just fell on me?
It's very weird, although in the guy's defence, if it can even be called a defence, I suppose, he passed a polygraph test.
Okay.
I mean, however, there's this documentary on Discovery Plus. You should watch it. It's called Strange World, and one of the episodes is about the car, about James Dean's Little Bastard. And the main guy in the show, he actually interviews this guy, I think his name was Sean Riley, who said that he was there when the car was hidden. And so the guy, the host, Chris, he says, so what's in the museum spot now, because the building was torn down? And Sean Riley was like, yeah, the building's torn down. And so Christopher was like, but they didn't find the car. And he was like, no, right. Generally, when you tear a building down, you find out everything that's hidden inside it because you've tore the whole building down. And a car's not the smallest of things to hide when you're ripping an entire building down.
Although at the beginning you did say it was the size of a smart car.
I mean, yeah, but even trying to hide a smart car.
Hoisted by Jean-Luc Picard.
Do you know what it is, right? There's so many, like, inconsistencies. Because, like they were saying in the documentary that I watched, they were saying there's this guy who has, like, apparently there's a lot of museums in America where they have car wrecks. Like there's Jane Mansfield's death car, and you can see Bonnie and Clyde's car, things like that.
Yeah.
So apparently one of these museums does have a tiny little square piece of metal that apparently has been forensically tested. I don't know how that works. It's been forensically tested, and it was part of the Porsche Spider that James Dean was killed in. And apparently when the wreck was like being stored or something, some mechanic just kind of walked past and there was a little bit of metal loose, and he was just like, yoink,
I'm having that.
He just snapped it off and took it with him. And apparently this is the bit of metal that, and apparently the guy who ran the museum said this is the only verified piece of the car in the world. But then I read an article on manufacturing.net that was only produced in October last year, and apparently the gear assembly of the car was discovered by a Porsche collector in rural Massachusetts after being hidden in a wooden crate for over 30 years. And it's got the paperwork with like the model number and everything, and because the actual I don't know what they call it. I'm not really very familiar with cars, but the actual, like, it's like the car serial number kind of thing. Was
the VIN number is
it's something like it was it's 550055. That was James Dean's like car serial number thing, and this gear assembly does have that number on it to prove that it did belong to that car, and it's in really good condition. And that
it's not been used for 30 years. No wonder it's in good condition.
Clearly, it's not the only part of the car that still exists in the world, but so there are a lot of inconsistencies, and there are a lot of fantastical stories. People saying like that because James Dean died in the car, it's retained some of his energy, and therefore it's like a bad luck magnet. Other people are saying that he was rubbing shoulders with known Satanists because Jane Mansfield was, and she died in a car crash. I mean,
I won't have a bad word said about Jane Mansfield. She was gorgeous.
She was gorgeous, but she was. Who was that bloke? You know that absolute whack job who had the hat with the horns on, and he like created like Satanism.
Aleister Crowley.
I don't mean Aleister Crowley.
Oh, okay.
I think it starts with an A.
David Icke. No, he's lizard people, isn't he?
Anyway, there's a picture of her, right, with him, and he's like holding a chalice out to her, and she's like drinking from this chalice, like they were friends. So people are like, oh, Jane Mansfield got offed because she rubbed shoulders with Satanists, and that's what happens when you rub shoulders with Satanists. But I didn't find any record of James Dean having partaken in any kind of Satanism at all. I think he just was an inexperienced driver who had a car that was out of his league. But as for everything else that happened afterwards, the amount of people that got injured and or killed was a little bit more than a coincidence for me.
Yeah, it does seem that there's a few too many things to be going on here that they're not coincidences.
And how do you lose an entire chassis? That's what gets it for me, and probably everybody else who's heard this story, is where the fuck did the car go?
I mean, could it not be just a simple case of like Burke and hairing him and filling it up with wood stopping off for a pit stop, rolling the car out the back, and then driving on and going, I swear it was in there.
But why would you?
So you could hide it behind a museum false wall, apparently.
That's the thing, though. Unless you were nicking it to, like, sell it or, like, on the black market or something, I just don't understand why you would get rid of it.
Maybe it's sat in some dictator's garage now.
Maybe.
There's loads that do it. They do it with fine art, don't they? There's loads of Rembrandts and Picassos that get robbed to order.
That's true. Michael Jackson did own a pair of the original ruby slippers. And Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Celebrities buy weird shit like that.
Lee said quickest man did, didn't it, really, on that score? I mean, yeah, some celebrities buy that weird shit, yeah. Friend of Dorothy's.
But do you know what I mean? It's like, unless there was these really, really painfully superstitious people who were like, the world is going to be better off without this car. But then with that logic, why didn't they just do what they did with the Annabelle doll and put it behind a glass case that says, positively do not open?
Could do. But I mean, was Ed and Lorraine going at this time? They must have just been starting off in 55.
Yeah, I think it should have been one of their first cases, really, but I don't think...
They dropped the ball. They dropped the ball, didn't they?
Maybe Ed hadn't passed his demonology course at that time.
That was it. He failed.
Couldn't deal in cursed cars because it might have had something to do with demons, and he hadn't passed his Demon 101 yet.
That's it.
Too dangerous.
He failed Greek demons, and he had to reset. So if it was only 3 months later, he would have been all over that shit.
I kind of feel like they missed out.
Yeah, that's. I'm so glad Alec Guinness is in that story.
He was so matter of fact in the interview as well. He did an interview with Parky, and he was just so matter of fact about it. He was just like, this car had. It was sinister, and I told him, please don't get in it. Like, no hint of irony, no tongue-in-cheek or anything. He was so serious. And that's why I was a bit like, oh, well, if Alec Guinness says so.
When Ben Kenobi tells you.
Yeah, exactly. Must be true.
Yes, that's interesting. But where is it? How'd you lose a car? I mean,
Exactly.
I'm sure we've all done it coming out of Tesco's and stuff, but...
Yeah,
not like... Yeah.
At 11 o'clock at night when everybody's finally left, you're like, fucking there it is. Everybody in the car park had to drive away with me to see my one fucking bright orange car.
Did they even consider, like, turning round and driving back down the route they'd come from, just to see if it had literally rolled out of the back?
I guess they must have done, but then at the same time, I guess that somebody would have reported it if it had rolled off into the middle of the road. They'd be like...
Car in the middle of the road here.
I mean...
It's knackered.
So at the time, surely everybody had heard of James Dean and how he died. And so if his wrecked car was lying in the middle of the road, I mean, you can still see the 130 all over the front and the sides. You presumably... And there was only 90 of them ever made, so it's not like it's a common car. Presumably somebody would have rang the police and gone... I think it's James Dean's wrecked car in the middle of the road. I'm not going to touch it to find out because we all know how that fucking goes, but I'm fairly sure it is, and it's blocking the highway. Just FYI, you might want to send somebody out to get it moved. Tow trucks are us or something like that.
Could be. Or maybe it's just drove off and is now driving round the moors of Cannock Chase with Slenderman and Bigfoot and everything else that ends up there.
Do you know what? I never thought of that.
Yeah, maybe that's...
I bet if we go to the Iron Castle, the Iron Fort...
That's it. It'll be in Slenderman's garage.
It'll be
like,
there.
check out my wheels, baby.
You'll hear voices, two little voices, and you'll walk into the fort and you'll just see Little Bastard and Christine, each with a fag in their wheel and a martini in the other. Just talking about the old days. I wouldn't be using any of its parts. I mean, I have my tinfoil hat, but I definitely wouldn't be.
Yeah, it's a lot of bad luck came from that car, really.
It's a lot of bad luck. So anyway, Goblins, you say?
Yes, Goblins. The Kelly Hopkinsville incident. So this is so called because it's between a place called Kelly and Hopkinsville. And it was done in... This occurred in 1955. And it was big news at the time. But it was also the inspiration from what I consider one of the scariest movies I ever saw, which is Critters. Now...
That silence was me judging you.
Yeah, that tells you how much of a horror fan I am. In fairness, I think I watched it when I was about 6 or something. And it's kind of, well, it's a comedy horror, let's be honest, but it's a darker version of Gremlins. And it's not scary remotely. I was more scared of that than I was arachnophobia, and I had arachnophobia.
Oh, Lord.
So I don't know how that works. But
you strange little man.
this incident was apparently the inspiration for that film. So, in the evening of August 21st in 1955, an extended family, or a group of people, let's say, because some were related but some weren't, turned up at Hopkinsville police station. And by all accounts, they were scared witless, and they were out of breath. They were seriously upset about something that had happened. Once it calmed down enough, the police actually got the tale out of what had happened, which is unbelievable to some extent. But when you actually read it, and I read this, and we were staying in, when I first read this, we were staying in a little place in Spain, and it was in one of them cabin things, and I was reading it, and I was like, oh, that door's not secure. Fucking hell. I could, like, a gust of wind could open that. So,
put that table in front of that door.
yeah, it was a bit... But, so what happened was, basically, their family friend, Billy Ray Taylor, who was 21, and he was visiting the Suttons from Pennsylvania. He'd come down to visit Lucky Sutton, who was 25, and he was one of the more forceful characters in this story. He by all accounts, he was more of a dominant personality with not what happened, but the aftermath of kind of what happened. Billy Ray was collecting water when he saw a real bright silvery object with an exhaust all the colours of the rainbow.
It was uncanny. It was like he was in the room.
Exactly, you see. He's actually from Pennsylvania, so that's not a Kentucky accent, so...
All right, okay. I knew that because you made it sound so convincing.
Exactly. I'm just saying that so the person that listens from Kentucky doesn't get mad. I'm so sorry, madman. So anyway, it apparently came silently towards the house, passed over it, stopped dead in the air, and then dropped to the ground and out of sight. He runs back in with the water, goes to tell the rest of the family what he's just seen, and they basically just say, shut up, get on with it.
Are they all from Manchester?
Well, yeah. This was kind of for two reasons. One was because they didn't believe him, obviously. And the second one was no one actually had I'm not going to say a good thing to say about him, but he wasn't held in the highest regard by the people that were there. Even Lucky, who he'd come to visit and who he worked with previously, wasn't so enamoured with him. He was a bit of a braggart and a bit of a...
Was he a jerk?
Yeah, basically. And as we'll see later on, it kind of... Everybody thought the same of him, even after they'd first met him. So basically, the family just go, yeah, whatever, come on, let's get back to it, let's have some food. Whatever. So, about an hour later, when they're just kind of relaxing, the dogs start barking in the backyard, and they're incessantly barking, like... So Billy Ray and Lucky get up and go to investigate what's happening. They think some animals have come to rile up the dogs, to scare the dogs kind of thing. And as soon as they open the door, the back door, the dog runs in to the house, and it's kind of cowering in the corner. And then the guys look at the dog and say, "Oh," and then look out into the back garden, into the backyard. And then what they actually see is a strange glow. It was a phosphorescent glow. And in the middle of this glow, there was a 3.5 foot tall humanoid creature.
Dear God.
It it had an oversized head, almost perfectly round, and the women kind of described it as tapered towards the chin, but Lucky was adamant that it was a round head. And after the first pictures came out, they were changed to Lucky's description, and they come out with a round head, and the arms extended almost down to the ground, and they had talons or claws on their hands. So the men are just looking at this kind of thing and they're like, what the shit? It starts coming towards them. Now, it came towards them in the weirdest possible way. It had its hands above its head, apparently. As if, and I think Lucky said, as if someone had just said to it, "Give me all your money." So, like it was a stick-up kind of thing. Lucky and Billy Ray weren't going to mess around with it. They were freaked out, so they did what most people on this period of time, or what most people would probably do if they had access to it, and they both grabbed guns, armed themselves, and started shooting it. One of them actually hit it, and it did what they described as a flip, and then scrambled off into the darkness. They were still shaken up about this, and then one of the women in the front room kind of screamed, and they came in and they saw another, or maybe another, could have been the same one. They only ever saw one at a time. There was only ever one in view at a time, I should say. But there was a few around, apparently. But then there was one at the window, at the side window, just peering in. So Lucky came in again. He was in the corner. He took the shot and he hit it, or at least it disappeared from the side window. Now, Billy then stepped out of the front door to see if they'd knocked it to the ground. And as he stepped out, there was an overhanging roof, and the group behind him saw a long clawed hand reach down and touch his hair. I know that's the bit that gives me goosebumps. And when I was reading it in this cabin, I was like, "Fuck this shit." So the group screamed and pulled Billy Ray back in. Lucky, who is kind of the alpha male in this, barged past and shot it off the roof. He actually saw it fall back. Just as he's doing this, just as he shoots it off the roof, Billy Ray noticed that there was one opposite on a branch in a maple tree, and then they both turned, Billy Ray and Lucky both turned and opened fire on this one. They hit it, they said they clearly hit it, but it floated down from the branch. As soon as it hit the ground, it scampered off into the forest. As soon as it had disappeared, they turned round to see another creature. It could have been the one that came off the roof. They didn't know, but they turned round to see another creature coming around the corner from the northwest corner of the house. And Lucky opened fire with a .22 shotgun at point blank range. And he hit it because he said it sounded like I'd just shot a metal bucket.
Those goddamn aliens in their Kevlar vests.
I know, but it did a flip. I think you're gonna do a flip if you hit a point blank range with a 2.2 with a shotgun. But there you go. It did a flip and then ran off again. So at this point, they kind of realise we're gonna have to use something stronger than bullets, because bullets aren't working, so they resorted to harsh language, I think. But
oh no, get that there, dynamite.
They retreated back into the house now, and they just decided to stay in the house because they were, even though the creatures were approaching the house, they weren't kind of try to retaliate for getting shot. They didn't look vengeful. They didn't look like they wanted to cause harm. It just looked more inquisitive than anything. And they never actually tried to enter the house. They'd just come up to the house, look through the window kind of thing. So the creatures, they continued to approach the house for the next few hours, and there was more bullets fired, but they did no good. And then at about 11 p.m, they were listening. They hadn't heard any noises on the roof, any noises outside for a while. So the family actually decided to flee at this time, and this is when they drove to the police station. The chief of police for Hopkinsville said these aren't the kind of people who normally run to the police for help. When they feel themselves threatened, what they do is they reach for their guns and they sort their problems out that way. Yeah, it's
legit.
It's not the best kind of attitude to be having, but I think what he was trying to say was they're not easily spooked by stuff.
They sound like the family out of Resident Evil Biohazard, so that kind of puts in perspective how terrifying the little goblin aliens were, if those people can be scared.
Yeah, they sound a bit like the Clampets.
Yeah.
The police were actually very sceptical at first, and they were like, yeah, whatever. But Billy Ray's heartbeat was 140 beats per minute, which is kind of twice the normal. And he was pale and hysterical. One of the women didn't want to go back. There was one who didn't see the creatures because she kept her eyes shut all the way through this incident. And then when she was at the police station and the police were going back to the farm with the Suttons, she decided to stay there because she couldn't face it. I have to say there was 7 children as well who actually went back to the farm, and she didn't, but whatever. Do what you want. So the police were sceptical, but they thought this could be a shootout between local citizens, so we'll have to go and see what's gone on. So considering they were sceptical, 4 city police, 5 state police, 3 deputy sheriffs, and 4 military personnel from the local Fort Campbell all went to the farm to see what had gone on. There's quite a lot of people going there, even though they're going, nah, you're having a laugh. Unfortunately, they didn't find any evidence of the aliens, but they did find that there'd been a shootout. There was gunshot, there was empty cases, and there was bullet holes and stuff like that. So right about now, they're probably thinking hijinks, you know. But Mrs. Glennie Lankford, who was the family matriarch, and she ruled over this family kind of thing. She wouldn't allow liquor in the farmhouse, and the police only discovered a few beer cans in the place. So they weren't partying, they weren't drunk, they were getting up to no good, but not in a Manchester way, I suppose. But so the police couldn't find anything, and it was pitch black, and they couldn't do anything. So they said, right, we'll come back tomorrow. And at around 2 a.m, the police departed and left the group alone. At 2:30, the creatures came back. So Mrs. Lankford, who is this, she's a 50-year-old. She's a proper Southern, takes no nonsense kind of woman. She was trying to get to sleep, and she kind of rolled over, and then she saw one of the creatures just staring at her with its hands on the window screen. And she had to do. She just thought she was tired and it was stress, and she was just seeing things. So she looked away 3 times. She looked away and back, away and back, and then on the 3rd time she went, "Oh, okay." She called out to Lucky to come and look and just see if she was seeing things. And the first thing he did was grab his gun, obviously, because that's the way he solves problems. And he shot at it, and it shot out the window frame, but it didn't do any harm to the actual creature. So the creatures approached again another few times. They did see them, but by this point, Mrs. Lankford was... I think they were more all just tired than anything else, because she was adamant that they weren't trying to attack the house. They weren't doing anything nefarious, so there was no point in shooting them, especially if the bullets weren't doing any damage.
So they were just like, should we just go to sleep?
Yeah, basically, just let them be. Let them, like, wobble up and then wobble away.
Like, Grandma, there's aliens at the window. I'm too tired. Just go to sleep.
I know, I've seen them. It's yesterday's news, That's so 1954. God. The last sighting of the creatures was half an hour before sunrise, and then they weren't seen in the area again. So the investigators came back the next day. They came back about 9 a.m. to search the day, and they questioned the occupants about what had happened. Now, the men of the house were out. Billy Ray had gone hunting, and Lucky and some of the other men had gone into town. So the women were there, and what the chief of police tried to do was try to trip them up with what they had said last night. So he'd kind of do a Columbo, and he'd like walk away and then go, "Oh, you said that thing." But every single time he tried to change the details, they'd come back with him and say, "No, that's wrong. This is how it was." And not all the stories were correct to each other. They stayed the same to each other. They were adamant this had actually happened. There was a lot of press. This garnered a lot of press, especially the next day. Literally, the next day, this was all round town. And even when Lucky came back from town, there was sightseers walking around the property. And they kept walking into the house. They kept walking into the house because they didn't have locks on the doors, so they'd just walk in.
That's just rude.
I know, it's just unbelievable. The press coverage of this was massive as well, because it was little green men. Even though none of them ever stated they were little green men, but this is how it got blown up. The Sutton family actually, they did move away, but they actually left on the second day because there were people trying to set up stands, like little stands in their front lawn, selling all these sightseers, like souvenirs of stuff that they just made up. And you can see they've made little puppets and stuff of the actual descriptions that they've given, and they churned them out real quick. But it's one of the weirdest cases. Now, there's a few things of what it could be. Now,
it's aliens, obviously.
Well, yeah. So, just put it this way: Project Blue Book, which was a study which was started in 1952 by the US government to identify all and any unidentified flying object incidents. So they collected 12,618 UFO reports, they concluded that most of them were misidentifications of natural phenomena. And they claim, this government study claims that this incident is a hoax. But Lucky and Mrs. Lankford were very straight up. They were exactly say it how it is kind of thing. And some of the people around town actually believed her because when she said something, it was something. She wasn't much for highball. She didn't inflate things. She didn't make stuff up. Lucky was a very dominating personality. When he came home that day, he started throwing people out of his place, and he actually, when he came back, this is how the drawing changed, because he kind of tore into the house, and the investigator was there, and he was taking statements from the women, and the picture that he'd already drawn, because he got descriptions from the women, was on the table. And Lucky came in and he was really riled up, and as soon as he saw the picture, he picked it up and then sat down and said, no, the face was rounder, kind of thing. But there was no need for them to lie. They didn't make anything from it. They got hounded off their own land. They did try and set up a kind of, it's 50 cents for admission, it's $1 for information, it's $10 for a photo. They did try and set that kind of thing up, but that's only because people were ignoring the no trespassing signs they put up. And they never took any money from it anyway. So they had to leave the place, and even a few months later, they left it, and it was their farm. It was they were growing tobacco there. They that's where they lived, and that was their living. So I don't understand why they make a hoax out of it, especially when Billy Ray's heartbeat was checked out by I wouldn't say a doctor, but he was an army medic, and it was 140 beats per minute. They were all scared and pretty much dishevelled when they turned up at the police station. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it was a hoax. I think they saw something, but they maybe misidentified it.
Well, I've seen the episode of Project Blue Book, which is very good, by the way. With that man from Game of Thrones, the Irish one. I've seen the episode that this is that they dealt with this, and he was saying that they'd seen large owls in the trees, and there was a chemical leak or something nearby, which accounted for they said that there was green goo on the trees where they'd shot at them. So yeah, they kind of debunked it, but I'd watched the Bedtime Stories video and I wasn't convinced. I was like, no, it's real.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with it could have been the Great Horned Owl theory, because they are fiercely territorial and they aggressively defend their nests, and they do stand 3 foot tall. But then, why? Was it
Are they
not
known for keep peering in windows though?
But this is it. And then why was it not the night before? You know why? If there's great horned owls in the area, why hasn't this happened before or
you would
after?
surely recognise one if you saw one, if you lived there or spent a lot of time there.
Exactly. And these people live off the land. They're hunters.
Yeah.
They know what's kind of in the area. I think it, unless they were smashed, then yeah, exactly, and that's it. And there's no proof, or there's nothing like that has ever happened. No proof of that happening. And one theory that I did like was that it was monkeys
that were in aluminium vests.
Well, apparently a travelling circus was passing through town, And 3 miles outside Hopkinsville, they pulled off the road to exercise the animals. And they had monkeys. And then when they got back, when they got to wherever they were going, they were a couple of monkeys short, apparently.
A couple of monkeys short of a circus.
Yeah. I mean, it just writes itself, doesn't it?
Which could be plausible. Like if it's dark and you're just basically shining like a lantern light, and you can just see these glowy eyes, and they're about 3 feet tall, and they've got long arms. Yeah, I guess it could be monkeys. But still, if you shoot a monkey, it bleeds. It doesn't go ka-ching.
Yeah. You're gonna know you've shot a monkey because there'll be monkey there still.
I don't and especially with a shotgun as well. No monkey is getting out of that. I'm sorry, but they're not.
Yeah, from short distance as well. Mm-hmm. The problem with the monkey story is that it's just made up. It never actually happened. Travelling Carnival did go through that area, but it was way earlier, and it didn't stop where the person who said it was the monkeys said it stopped. It stopped further down the road. So unfortunately, because it's in the book about this incident, and the skeptic says, "Oh well, I don't believe it's that because there was monkeys half a mile away." And the interviewer goes, "What now? What now?" And then he says, "Yeah," and he says all this, and then she checks it and goes, "No. No, you've just made all that up." And he did, unfortunately. But I don't know. What do you
think it was?
I think it was aliens. I really do think it was. I think it was something. It was critters. It's something. I think the horned owls. No, because it would have happened again. Because if they were. Okay, they weren't attacking the house, but they were coming up to the house. So therefore, that's kind of, they're defending their nests. Mm-hmm. But they would have had a nest there the next day and the day after. So why were they not defending it further? And do you know what I mean? I don't...
And presumably you can tell the difference between a wing and an arm.
Yeah.
Wings are quite considerably bigger.
Yeah, especially like if it's got it, like it's... stick your hands up kind of thing, and it's walking towards you.
Oh no, I'm just picturing owls going, I submit with their wings up. No, I don't buy it either.
I mean, I think it was something, and maybe I don't know. Maybe I don't know. This is one of the most believable alien stories that is out there. And as well, there's kind of a sequel to it.
Critters 2.
Yeah, Critters 2. But in 2012, a gentleman was contacted from someone in Kentucky saying that there was creatures that I have come to believe are extraterrestrial in origin on his property. And the descriptions that he gives, the size and stature of a small child, large oily eyes, lipless mouths, it seems that they may have made a return.
Is this the one where they were playing with the kids' toys in the front yard?
Yes, actually.
Oh, that's fucking terrifying. I do remember this.
Yes, and they came from an abandoned mine.
Yes.
Yes. So
like Skinwalker Ranch.
Yes. Yeah. But we will do that on another day.
Yeah.
Because that is
that's a rabbit hole that we're itching to get down.
Indeed, because it does actually open up into a big story, and coming in with Men in Black and crazy other such stuff.
Yeah, like we think COVID's our biggest problem right now.
Oh.
Wait till the cryptid wars start.
I tell you, they were all making a comeback. I tell
They
you,
are.
this is it. This is the second cryptid wave. This, Jesus, face mask won't help us now.
Well, neither will my zombie plan.
What's that?
I've specifically built my zombie plan around zombies. I cannot account for cryptids that fly and, can see in the dark and shit like that. I'm just going with dumb things that used to be human. I'm probably going to die. Not going to lie.
On that bombshell. We shall leave it there. And next week, we will be talking about true crime. Do you have a topic?
I haven't made a full decision yet, but I'm thinking I'm going with the Keddy Cabin murders. What are you going with?
Well, I am quite interested in the Circleville writer incidents. So maybe the Keddy Cabin and the Circleville writer next week. And then, that should be good. A little bit of true crime, a little bit of
true crime.
Yeah, we do. Getting back to our roots there, really.
Stuff that doesn't terrify us into nightmares at night.
Indeed, I think we can have a week off reading up stuff. You had Slender Man last week. I've had Critters
Goblins
this
week.
Jesus, now we'll just go for good old fashioned murder.
Yeah.
You know where you are, then, don't you?
You don't have to watch Bridget Jones before bed and things like that, just to try and lighten things up a bit.
Oh yeah. So on that double bombshell. We shall see you all next week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I have been Contumacious Ann.
And I have been Atreya.
And we shall see you all next time.
Bye.
Bye.
The MO Podcast.